Jon Snow and Catelyn Stark go together like peanut butter and caviar, which is to say that they don't go together, so please don't force them together. It's not good for either of them. So what would happen if Lady Stoneheart met a resurrected Jon Snow? Well, I don't think it would go well, actually. It would probably be a bad thing, some might say. Actually, it might not matter at all, and it might go fine, because you have to remember that both of these characters are like the resurrected versions of themselves, and, well, they might not care about anything anymore. So if post-resurrection Catelyn and post-resurrection Jon were to meet, I think there are two possible scenarios, one that's negative and one that's positive. Let's talk about them right now. So let's start with scenario one, the negative scenario, where they're both resurrected, they meet each other, and damn, it goes as horribly wrong as possible. So in this scenario, it goes as wrong as possible because when you are resurrected, one of the effects of that is that you are kind of frozen in the mental state that you were in at the point of your death prior to being resurrected. So take Catelyn Stark, for example. Catelyn Stark is very traumatically murdered at the Red Wedding. Those are her final moments of life, and so when she is resurrected, it is that moment that she is kind of frozen in. That moment of like rage and betrayal and anger, and that is what, unfortunately, influences her as she becomes Lady Stoneheart. She is just this vengeful being who is wanting to, cause pain, like all across the Riverlands for anyone who she feels betrayed her and her family. And so with Jon, in a potential resurrection, we can assume that there might be some similar-ish things to that, even with the added, complication of him possibly warging into his direwolf before he dies. Okay, so let's break that down. So Jon, is killed in the book. They go stabby stabby. He dies. Very trauma. All cool. His last word is ghost. Now, something we know from the book is that when a skin changer, a warg, dies, they are able to, in that last moment, basically jump into their animal companion and begin their second life. We get the example of that in A Dance with Dragon, the book where Jon dies towards the end. The prologue is from the perspective of a skin changer wildling named Varamir Sixskins. He, basically, I won't go into the whole thing. He dies by the end, he jumps into his animal, and he begins his second life. He talks about it a lot, so, foreshadowing. So, because Jon's last word is ghost, we can presume that he probably, hopped into ghost at the moment of his death. And so there's a possibility that this complicates the kind of, Red Priest resurrection scenario that Catelyn finds herself in, because, as we know from Catelyn's situation, people who are brought back using, R'hllor, the Lord of Lights, magic, when they are brought back, they aren't really themselves, they're kind of a shadow of themselves, and large pieces of them are missing, and like I said, what's left is kind of the moment of your death kind of frozen in time, a la Catelyn and Lady Stoneheart. Now, Melisandre's at the wall when Jon dies, so we can assume, even if it hasn't happened yet, that kind of similar-ish to the show, she will somehow resurrect Jon Snow, and, he'll be back. And so you would assume that in a very similar way to Catelyn, that, he would be missing, chunks of himself, and would be like another rage monster, a la this fun illustration. But of course, there is the matter of him having, jumped into ghost at the moment of his death, possibly preserving his consciousness. So lots of people like to argue that, Jon won't be a crazy rage monster when he comes back because he jumped into ghost, and that kind of shields and protects him. Sure. Now, the issue with that people who like to argue, no, Jon will be perfect when he comes back, like to forget, is that, yes, that'll probably preserve his personality, so that pieces of him aren't missing, but there is another effect to starting your second life, and that is that when your consciousness jumps into the animal, your mind slowly begins to meld with that animal. So even if Jon is only there for a little bit, there is a danger stated with skin changing and warging that, if you do it for too long, if you stay in the mind of the animal for too long, you become more and more like them, which is, what happens with your second life. So even if Jon is brought back and he doesn't have, the huge chunks of his brain missing, like other Lord of Light resurrectees, he's still going to have the issue in that his mind is not going to be the same because he has been merging with Ghost. Now, you might argue that, well, he's not going to have been in Ghost that long. Okay, but, okay, let's look this from, a craft standpoint. Why is George mentioning these details about, the minds merging and stuff if he's not going to use it with the person that is most obviously could be used for? You know what I mean? So, in the negative scenario, Cat has come back, as her rage monster self. Jon has come back as his, wolfy aggressive self, and then they meet. Oh no. So at this point, Jon, in his aggressive wolfy self, doesn't give a shit about anything. He's just doing what he wants. He doesn't have patience. He's more aggressive. He's more feral. He's more animal. And then, a not super inviting Lady Stoneheart shows up. He's not going to have the patience that he had, when he was a child and had to just kind of deal with her because she was the lady of the house. You know what I mean? Meanwhile, Catelyn as Lady Stoneheart has no self-control. Again, she is just like an unbridled rage monster seeking revenge against anyone that she thinks has wronged her, which could become complicated with Jon Snow if they fulfill a particular plot point that the show posited could happen. I say posited because it's an adaptation and, they didn't have George's source material at the time, regardless of what we think he may or may not have told them. Okay, don't start that in the comments. But anyway, in the show, Jon Snow becomes King of the North. Which, okay, cool. I personally kind of take that with a grain of salt. I don't know that that's going to happen in the book. I personally don't think so. But say it does, and then after becoming King of the North, he comes face to face with Lady Stoneheart. Jesus Christ, that's going to go as horribly wrong as you can imagine. Because that is Catelyn Stark's greatest fear. Catelyn, treated Jon Snow horribly, in part because of the terror associated with bastards in her generation. Because remember, Catelyn Stark was raised by Hoster Tully, who was a veteran of the last Blackfire Rebellion, a war which was the last in a series of wars that took 100 years to play across, in which a bastard line of Targaryens tried to usurp the regular Targaryen. So the War of the Nine Penny Kings, the last of the Blackfire Rebellions, is only, I want to say, 30 years old at this point, and very fresh in the minds of certain characters. Correction, it was 40 years old. So that generation is traumatized by bastards, usurping the claim of true-born sons. And so Catelyn, of course, is going to have this intense fear and distrust of her husband's bastard, who is being raised along hers, just like Daemon Blackfire was with his brother Daeron Targaryen. Not to mention, one of the justifications used in the initial Blackfire Rebellion is that Daemon Blackfire looked like a real Targaryen versus Daeron, who was bookish and quiet and shorty and all that stuff. But Daemon Blackfire was a warrior who had the Targaryen look and was wielding Blackfire, the Targaryen sword. So he looked like the ruler should look, unlike Daeron, his little brother, blah, blah, blah. Actually, I don't know if they were little brother. It's fine. They were separate moms, get it. You get it. Daeron was trueborn, Blackfire wasn't. You got it. So consider Catelyn Stark has Robb Stark, the trueborn son of Ned Stark, which he is, but he looks like a Tully. Because in the books, Robb Stark has red hair and the blue eyes of a Tully. He does not look like Ned, kind of at all. Meanwhile, Jon Snow, Ned's bastard, has the Stark look. He looks just like Ned. He has the brown hair, he has the gray eyes, he looks like a Stark. So here you have a trueborn son and a not so trueborn son. The trueborn son looking like a Stark is going to cause some anxiety for this person. Again, not saying it's cool to bully a child, but again, nuance, let's try not to be allergic to it. So if Lady Stoneheart meets a resurrected Jon Snow who has just been crowned King in the North, that is her worst nightmare realized, and this person does not have self-control at this point. She's going to try to kill everyone, and I think it is going to be chaotic. They will try to kill each other. The groups are going to clash. It's going to be a disaster. And Jon, being feral at this point, is not going to give a shit. He's not going to have that, calming mentality that, let's find a different way. No, it's just going to be, fire hitting fire. This is not going to be good. And then, of course, there is the other option that nothing happens, and it's kind of basically for the same reasons that we already talked about. The whole idea that when a resurrection happens, you lose chunks of yourself, and because these characters might be frozen in the spot that they were in at the moment of their death, well, their animosity towards each other probably wasn't top of their mind, so they might not, still retain it. Basically, they wouldn't care because they don't remember this bit of their life. And so when they see each other, it could literally be just oh, yeah, you're you, I vaguely remember you, but all the details are gone because I'm an undead fire white. So yeah, I don't know. Either it goes really bad or it goes neutral. But you tell me, what do y'all think? Okay, goodbye.